So I took another full length. This was my breakdown. I dropped a little in Chem Phys, but I guess it was was heavy on Orgo, so I had to go review some of the
Mhm.
mechanisms. For cars, it only let me do 52 questions for some reason, and I got 32 right, so I just kind of assumed it'd be the same as the other one.
Got it. And
Yeah, and
uh, Jack Weston cars or
yeah, Jack Weston.
got it.
Mhm.
Awesome.
And so yeah, I was wondering if we could do that so the first half I started off doing pretty well, and then the second half I just with the timing and everything kind of just threw me off. So I was wondering if we can compare the mind maps that we did the other day.
Yep.
I kind of I did it for this one, but I missed all the questions on this like what's it called? This thing. So I was seeing maybe where I went wrong and stuff like that. Compare.
hmm Yeah. One sec. Let's see. So, okay. So you said that you wanted to go over this passage.
Yeah, it's because I missed all the questions
Okay.
and I don't know. It could be like a timing issue too, but I just want to compare mind maps and see like where process went wrong.
Okay. So let's see. All right. So, um, okay. So yeah, why don't we start it out?
You want me to read it? Yeah. Okay. All right. It is standard, at least in cultures informed by the Christian tradition, to think of a moral person as a person of principle.
Okay.
This per
Tell me about that sentence.
uh, just saying Christian tradition, moral person is someone who has principles, a person of principle.
So that's our new idea, right?
Yeah,
So it's standard in cultures informed by the Christian tradition that a moral person is a person of principle, right?
yeah.
Okay.
This person is the person who has learned or developed for herself a sufficient range of sound moral principles and who has sufficient skill at applying these principles to cases as they crop up. So this person has sufficient moral principles, and then he also has the sufficient skill to apply the these principles to certain cases.
So same idea, ELAB, right?
Yeah,
And this could be, um, so this is a person who has good moral principles and then also able to apply the principles, right?
hmm.
Okay.
There is no need to underestimate the sort of skill that would be required for this. One needs judgment both to discern whether a principle applies at all. It's talking about no need to underestimate their skills, and then
Yeah. No need to underestimate the skill required for this.
yeah,
So in other words, saying that it's kind of hard to do this.
Yeah. Says one needs judgment both to discern whether a principle applies at all, and if it does, what exactly it requires of one. So it's saying you need judgment to see if even this principle applies, and then what does it require to do?
Okay.
Like what it requires you to do. And then it says, nonetheless, however difficult it may be, moral judgment is conceived here as the application of principles to specific cases. Nonetheless, however, I think this is it's kind of like ELAB.
Hmm.
It says
Saying moral,
moral,
yeah, moral judgment is the application of principles to specific cases.
yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about what we can put for this paragraph.
You want to like know what I kind of put originally when I was doing it,
We could do it like a
or
new,
after at the end?
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, okay. Um, just say like moral person. It's a person of principle, um, who has sufficient skills to apply them as these principles come up. Um, uh, and then that person needs judgment to see if that principle even applies. So basically, moral judgment is how you apply certain principles to certain cases.
Yep, I put moral, which means a person who has principle. But also that moral judgment is when you apply principles to specific cases. Okay.
Okay. If moral judgment is a rational enterprise, it must be subject to constraints of rationality, chief among which is regularity. Regularity?
Okay.
Um,
Is the same
kind of,
idea?
I think it's a new idea
Okay. And what is it saying?
saying moral judgment, if moral judgment is rational, it could be subjected to constraints, and one of those is regularity.
Yep.
What is demanded of us when we are required to be consistent in our what is demanded of us when we are required to be consistent in our moral judgment? It's posing a question. It's talking about what is uh, demanded of us, like when we talk about moral judgment.
So just asking like a rhetorical question.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, continue.
the answer is that we are required to apply our principles consistently. That is to apply the same principle to similar cases. So it's saying here, like what's demanded of us is to apply consistent our principles consistently and to similar cases. It's kind of like generalization, kind
So,
of.
yeah.
Um, it is inconsistent to apply the principle don't lie to cases involving one's friend and not to those that involve strangers. So now it's talking about the inconsistent part. Um, you can't just say certain principle like don't lie to just involving your certain friends and not to like involve strangers because it could just apply. You can have to apply it broadly instead of specifically.
So it's inconsistent for the principle to apply the principle don't lie to one's friends and then to not have that apply that principle if you're involved with strangers.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you want to behave in that sort of way, your principle is going to be don't lie to your friends. So it's basically saying if you inconsistently apply this principle, you'll be just specifically directing to your friends instead of like certain strangers.
Okay.
So for this one, we can say um, you have to apply consistent principles to similar cases to be consistent in our like moral judgment.
So apply principles consistently means to have the same principle to similar cases. For example, and what you don't want is, for example, the principle don't lie to be applied towards your friends, but not to be applied towards strangers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. What this tells us, of course, is that consistency is not the only requirement. So you not only have to be consistent, but then it's going to talk about something else. Our moral principles are supposed to be impartial, and it is not obvious that the principle, don't lie to your friends, meets this condition. So not only do you have to be consistent, you also have to be impartial. Um, and it's not shown in the don't lie to your friends example.
Or that
Or,
it just isn't obvious that it's in that example.
yeah,
Okay.
okay. But at least someone who takes it as his principle can tell the truth to his friends and lie to strangers without inconsistency. Okay. Mm.
So you're saying, but at least someone who takes it as his principle can tell the truth to his friends and lie to strangers without inconsistency. So the statement, don't lie to your friends, is without inconsistency,
Yeah.
which is a little confusing. Um, but I think what they're trying to say is that if you, instead of saying don't lie, if you say don't lie to your friends, then it's not inconsistent if you lie to strangers compared to if you just said don't lie.
Yeah. Mm. Statement was kind of confusing to be honest.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Why do we
oh,
oh, it's the print, sorry. Um, saying like consistent principle is not the only requirement. You also have to be impartial, and the don't lie to your friends doesn't necessarily meet that condition.
um, what do you mean by that?
Like what it says here, don't lie to your friends meets this condition.
Mhm.
Saying it's not obvious.
Okay. And then we have our contrast word, and then we're saying that if someone, I mean, this principle would mean that someone could lie to strangers and tell the truth to friends without that being an inconsistency.
Okay.
So I put that you also need to be impartial, and that if the principle is don't lie to your friends, it's not inconsistent if you lie to strangers.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a semantic thing. It's like if your principle is don't lie and you lie to strangers and you don't lie to friends, that's inconsistent, right?
Yeah.
But if your principle is to don't lie to your friends and you tell the truth to your friends and you lie to strangers, you're not violating that, right?
Hmm.
So I think that's what they mean by that.
Okay. Why do we think of the moral person as the person of principle? And why do we think of moral judgment as subject to this sort of consistency constraint? So it's posing another question is saying why do we think is that a moral person is also a person of principle? And why is the moral judgment consistency constraint?
Mhm.
And it talks about the answer, I think, is that we suppose that without moral principles, there could be no such thing as the difference between right or wrong.
Okay.
So it's
Yep.
you know, so it's saying like without these moral principles, we can't differentiate between right and wrong.
So yeah, so okay, so we're saying, okay, why do we think of the moral person as a person of principle? And that's one of the arguments that was mentioned from the first paragraph that a moral person is a person of principle, right?
Yeah.
And we also say that a moral person exercises moral judgment. And so we're talking about that here as well. Why do we think of a moral judgment as being, this consistency constraint? And then we have our super, super rare author's opinion, where
Yeah.
the author explicitly states their opinion. So I think, without moral principles, or rather, moral principles themselves would be to be able to tell the difference between right and wrong, right?
Hmm.
So it's good that we got that. It's very rare to get an author's opinion, but we got one right here.
Hmm. Rightness and wrongness are peculiar properties, and the only way that an action can get them is by being related to a principle in one way or another. So saying right and wrong are peculiar properties. Uh,
And they're
and
really
then
a principle in one way or the other, right?
yeah, yeah,
So we could say, yeah, okay.
okay. And then it says unless there are principles saying which sorts of actions are right and which are wrong, none would be right and none wrong. So it's saying less like that. Principle is actually saying this is right and this is wrong.
Mhm.
Uh, says none would be right and none wrong. So it's saying right and wrong, they're kind of related in one way or another. But then if a principle says this is right and this is wrong, then they would neither be. So none would be right and none would be wrong.
I think the other way around. So they're saying, if you don't have like a relation to a principle, there's no way to tell right from wrong.
Oh,
So
okay.
you need a principle to say what is right and what is wrong. So it's kind of like
Hmm.
the principle of don't lie. If you lie,
Yeah.
you could say that that is wrong. And if you don't lie, you could say that that is right. But without that principle, there's no way um, to tell if you're right or wrong. So I wrote moral principles equals difference between right and wrong. And that right and wrong are dependent on principles.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, and then I wrote
And
AO or author's opinion.
okay, yeah. And so it says if this were so, it would hardly be surprising that the good moral judge would be the person capable of following in her mind the way in which actions get to be right or wrong. Okay. I think it's a same idea. I think it's saying if this were so.
If this were so, it would hardly be surprising that the good moral judge would be the person capable of following in her mind the way in which actions get to be right or wrong. So,
Not really sure what that's saying.
yeah, I think they're saying that a good moral judge is capable of, I guess, seeing which actions get to be right and wrong.
Okay. Which requires knowing the relevant principles and seeing that they have this effect here and that effect there. It's saying you need to know principles and like seeing what effects they have.
Um, which requires knowing the relevant principles and seeing that they have an effect here and there. Um, and it would be hardly surprising that consistency in judgment would amount to no more than applying similar principles to similar cases. Okay, so we're saying here that a moral judge knowing requires knowing the relevant principles and having this effect here, this effect there, and that it boils down to actually just applying similar principles to similar cases. So what we could say here, we could say that moral judge requires knowing relevant principles and or and applying similar principles to similar cases. Moral judge requires knowing relevant principles and applying um, similar principles to similar cases.
Okay. Um, Paragraph 6. A rather different argument appeals not so much to a metaphysical need for principles as to a as to an epistemological need. Mm. So different argument appeals uh I don't even know. I think it's just trying to differentiate between these two needs or
Let's see, a rather different argument appeals not so much to a metaphysical need for principles as to an epistemological need. Um, that could be confusing to know what that means, so we can just continue to move forward.
yeah. If there is a distinction between right and wrong actions, how are we to detect it? So it's saying if there is a certain distinction between right and wrong, how are we able to see it, detect it? It's saying there must be a detectable difference between the properties of the right ones and the properties of the wrong ones. And it's saying there must, like there has to be a difference between the right properties and then like properties are the wrong ones. So there has to be there has to be a detectable difference. Now it's saying now if an action is wrong, it is wrong because of certain other features it has, the non-moral features that make it wrong. Okay. So it's saying if there's a wrong action, it's because of other features it has, like the non-moral features. No, we talked about moral earlier here, and it keeps coming up. So it's saying non-moral features that make it wrong.
Yep, so there must be a detectable difference between what's right and what's wrong. And if it's wrong because of certain other features, which are the non-moral features that make it wrong. And that
Yeah.
these, so okay, if so we're talking about action. So okay, if an action is wrong, it's because of non-moral features, and that these non-moral features should be able to be detectable, and good moral judges, having detected them, can somehow work out whether they make the action right or wrong. So, moral judges are able to detect or should be able to detect this.
Mhm.
And then I'll just kind of finish this. So then we have our contrast word, but if this ability is not a matter of magic, it must um, rest on an at least implicit knowledge of regularities connecting the non-moral features of actions to the moral properties. So this is some type of knowledge of connecting non-moral features of actions and the moral properties, and that moral principles specify such regularities. So pretty tough paragraph here. So I think what we're saying here is that there's so now we're talking about actions. So we could say that must be detectable difference between right, wrong actions that are based on non-moral features. And good moral judge can connect these to moral properties. So there must be detectable difference between right and wrong actions, which are non-moral features, and a good moral judge should be able to connect these non-moral features of actions to moral um, properties. Okay, so now if we look at through our map, we can see paragraph one, moral principle, moral, whether a person, so moral is equal to principle, and moral judgment applies principles to specific cases. We say that again in paragraph two, applying principles consistently.
Mhm.
And then we talk about that in paragraph three as well. And then we say moral principles. Um, in paragraph four, we say moral principles uh, involve you to know the difference between right and wrong. And if this is an author's opinion, so we can connect that in as well. And then we say in paragraph five, moral judgment requires knowing and then applying. So yeah, we have the repeated idea of applying similar principles, similar cases. So
Mm.
pretty much all throughout the passage, they talked about roughly the same thing. So what we can say is we could say that moral judgment requires or applies consistent principles to cases. Um, Similar principles to similar cases, and um, yeah, I think that could work. Um, okay, so why don't you take your screenshot?
Okay. Okay.
All right.
Should we go through the questions, or do you want to hear my mind map, or?
Yeah, let's go through the questions and then we can look at the map. So for this question here, let me block out the passage.
In the context of paragraph 2, the comparison between how one treats one's friends and people one does not know is least reliable as an index of how. So saying when you're comparison between how you treat one's friend and people you don't know, which is like strangers, is least reliable. So which ones is are these least reliable of an index how? And then we talked about our mind map. We applied principles consistently, same principle to similar cases. Example, not like don't lie to friends and lie to strangers.
Mhm. So so paragraph two, we talked about applying principles consistently. And um, so so the comparison of how one treats one's friends and uh and people that one does not know is least reliable as an index of. So the partial one, I think that's talked about in paragraph three. So that could be a localization thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
how moral you are, I think they talk about that in, paragraph one and then paragraph four, where we say a moral person is a person of principle and can tell the difference between right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So we
So
could,
maybe I confused. So consistent, we talked about here, applying principles consistently, but then A talks about how principled one is, like as in it's not really related to principles. Uh,
so the consistent one is what is mostly talked about in P2, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I think that okay. Yeah, okay. So tell me like all right, how did you go about this when you were answering it?
The partial one kind of stood out for me because it's like they talked about it in paragraph three.
What?
So I feel like since they talked about it in paragraph three, it wouldn't be related to paragraph two, and that's how it was least reliable.
Uh-huh. I see, I see. This
But then I guess now I see the localization where it's like it's only talking about paragraph two. I shouldn't even consider the other one.
okay. So this is okay, so this is tough because it's saying least reliable index of how. So I think that okay, so paragraph two talked about consistency. So B is relevant, uh,
Yeah,
as well as let's see, let's take another look at this passage.
yeah,
So paragraph two, moral judgment, rational, must be regular and consistent. We must apply our principles consistently. Same principles to similar cases. It's inconsistent to apply the principle don't lie to cases involving friends and not to those involving strangers. If you want to behave in that sort of way, your principle is going to have to be don't lie to your friends. Okay. So, paragraph two, we talk about the necessity of consistency, and we also talk about um and I guess we like if you're moral, you're going to have certain principles. So perhaps that can
hmm
mean C could be talked about. Um, and then how partial you are. So, okay, impartial would mean that you treat the two groups similarly, right?
yeah.
But if you're partial, it means that you're favoring one group, right?
hmm
And so if you're saying not to lie or it's okay to lie to strangers and not as long as you don't lie to your friends, you're being partial.
Yeah.
So so
Okay.
initially I said D was wrong because they mentioned impartial in paragraph three, but I actually now see that it's not because of that. It's because
hmm
in paragraph two, that is just what partial means. Like impartial means you're treating the groups equally. Partial means you're treating one group favorably and one group badly. So
hmm
we are talking about that here in paragraph
Okay.
two. So partial is there. And I think moral is just if someone, I mean, we talked about in the first paragraph, a moral person is someone who has principle. So in paragraph two, a moral, like we're talking about people like principles. So that basically means that you're a moral person if you have principles. So we do talk about that here, but we don't talk about how principled someone is, right? We're just talking about if you have, if you apply, if you say that your principle is don't lie, then you can't lie to strangers, and therefore you must change your principle to don't lie to your friends.
Okay.
But this is a super tough passage and a super tough question. And you can see that with, 32, this even kind of spread and like 32% choosing D because for the same reason that we both thought, which is that, they talk about impartial in paragraph three, and that's in a different paragraph. So
Yeah.
This is a really tough one.
Okay. Yeah. One of the Ten Commandments, one of Christianity's central codes dictating moral conduct, is thou shalt not kill. Does this tenet support the author's argument? Uh, so the author, like, main idea is moral judgment applies similar principles to similar cases. Um, moral conduct is thou shalt not kill. Uh, I guess I guess it kind of confirms it because moral judgment is like you're being moral, and by being moral is like you shouldn't kill. Yeah. So
So
that's what.
so okay. They're saying thou shalt not kill.
Yeah.
And
1 second, sorry.
yep,
Sorry.
you're good.
So does my like reasoning make sense of thou shall not kill is like using your moral judgment?
Um, so support the author's argument. Um, so okay, I guess this is telling us that thou shalt not kill is just it's like it's like don't lie. Like it doesn't matter like so like yeah, consistency wise, it should be the case that you should not kill anyone. Um and I guess that could apply to this just because yeah, I guess just because we're talking about um let's see. Okay. So one of the Ten Commandments, one of Christianity's central codes dictating moral conduct is thou shalt not kill. Does this tenet support the author's argument? So the author's argument is applying similar principles to similar cases. And I guess that if you're saying thou shalt not kill, it's not saying like thou shall not kill this type of person, but it's okay to kill this type of person. So it's like the don't lie example. Like if the principle is don't lie, you have to be consistent. You can't lie. You can't just apply it to your friends, like, and lie to strangers. So
Yeah.
here, I think that that supports the author's argument by having this rule being applied, in all cases,
Yeah.
but also really tough one. And you can see 37% chose C.
Okay. Which of the following pairs of actions is an example of what the author probably means in applying that right and wrong actions have different and detectable properties?
Uh,
Um,
yep.
okay, this one's talking about, I think, like, I think it's talking about paragraph 3. Something, don't lie to your friends is not consistent if you lie to strangers.
Hmm. Oh, sorry. You said don't lie to your friend is not inconsistent if you lie to strangers. So so here we're talking about right and wrong actions, right?
Hmm.
And that's where it goes back to, I guess it could even go back to the main idea, which is that it's all about applying the same principle to the same type of case.
Hmm.
So, so like again, don't lie was mentioned as like it's okay to, so if your principle is don't lie and you apply that principle to your friends, but you don't apply it to your um to strangers, then you're inconsistent, right?
Yeah.
And now they're saying right and wrong actions have different and detectable um properties. Like we can see that in, so like for instance, so for B, it's like, and this kind of even connects to like the previous question of like thou shalt not kill.
Yeah.
Like that statement, thou shalt not kill, if you believed in that principle, then it applies for all cases. But
Yeah.
if you're saying that, okay, it's wrong to kill someone, but it's okay to kill someone in self-defense, that would be an inconsistency, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it should be B. Whereas A says robbing a rich person and robbing a poor person, you're still robbing a person, and there's no situation where either of these would be right.
It's kind of similar to C when you're still lying, like lying to a family member and lying to a judge, you're still lying at the end of the day.
Uh-huh.
It's still wrong.
Yep.
While here you're kind of
Mm-hmm.
like there's like self-defense. While here hitting a person and hitting a baseball, kind of yeah.
Yeah, so another thing could be like lying to a family member and then lying to like, let's say like a sick, let's say like a like a grandmother who's sick and has like heart issues and stress and hypertension and stuff. Like if something tragic happened, I guess it would be okay to lie to that person because you don't want
Yeah.
to. So that could be another example, but
Okay.
I think so
I
far,
see that.
yeah. So I think so far the questions that we've seen could be best answered with the main idea of um applying similar principles to similar cases.
Okay. Okay. The passage suggests that inconsistency is um
So I was thinking about whether I should have put this in or not. So because over here, paragraph two, we say that if moral judgment is rational, it must mean that it is regular, which means consistent.
oh
Yeah. So I didn't put that in
okay.
my map, but we do say that there. Yeah.
Is amoral the opposite of moral?
So im immoral with an I is the opposite of moral, but the A just means it lacks morality. So
Okay.
it's like asexual, where the A just cancels out the thing that comes after it.
Okay.
But
All right.
yeah, but like so like immoral, so like irrational, the I part means that it's, the opposite of rational. Um, but yeah, so amoral is just like, lacking. It's like moral means that you have good morals. Immoral with an I means that you have bad morals. And then amoral with an A just means you don't have morals.
So if it said immoral with an I, would that be kind of right or no?
Um, if it said immoral with an I, um, yeah, I don't think it would be right just because we really didn't talk much about immoral stuff. We really just talked about moral and um how that means, that you have a principle and that you can apply these through moral judgment.
Okay.
So it'll be irrational just because of, yeah, in paragraph two,
Two.
bring up the concept of consistency as a reason, um, as a requirement for rationality.
Okay.
But you could also see that 44% chose, what you chose.
Yeah.
So everyone's thinking that this is hard. And this one too, 57, percent.
Yeah.
So
It says
definitely,
which
yep.
which of the following approaches to moral instruction of a child would be most likely to be stressed by a parent who shared the author's views? So the author's views is moral judgment applies similar principles to similar cases. So a parent would think that way. Uh, so A, emphasizing the importance of listening to adults. Uh, no, it's not really what the question's asking.
So the author's views are that, you need to apply same principles to same cases. So what we're going to be looking for um is the application of similar principles to similar cases. So B says just that you can have different perspectives on right and wrong. Um, but it doesn't talk about any application, right?
Yeah.
Whereas C, providing and reinforcing rules of behavior, that would be an application of
Mm.
principles to cases. So that could be like, you know, go to bed, by 10 p.m. or don't eat, candy or something like that. Those can help, uh, those would be likely stressed by a parent who shared the author's views because it's application.
Yeah. Okay.
But also you could see that 57% chose B. So yeah, this is a really tough passage. It's definitely one of the toughest passages I've seen. Um, it's just very, very abstract.
Yeah,
And
it's very specific. Like it's asking for like rational enterprise.
yep, yep.
And then I don't know.
Yeah, it's very,
It's like I feel like I had the similar main idea,
oh yeah,
but
your map.
it's like okay, so for paragraph one, I put like the Christian tradition, moral person is a person of principle and has sufficient skill to apply these principles.
You took a screenshot of this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So so yeah, I would say for that, you can make it shorter by writing what we so you said that you wrote the moral person is a person of principle
And
and
has sufficient skill to apply these principles.
all right, and is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say you like how what you're lacking there. So you have that a moral person is a person of principle, and that there's sufficient skill to tell me what you wrote.
to apply these principles.
Okay, so I think the main thing that you're missing is that you are applying principles to specific cases
Hmm.
because, you know, that kind of relates to our entire main idea. So I think that, so what we wrote here, moral is a person with principle and moral judgment. So I would just say for you that you should include the moral judgment part
Hmm.
because you just wrote that a moral person applies principles. So the moral person has principles, and the moral judgment is applying principles to specific cases.
Okay.
So that's what I would put for there. And then for paragraph two.
Yeah. Paragraph two, I have to put, I put, you have to apply consistent principles to our moral judgment.
Okay.
And that's it.
And did you know what that meant, applying them consistently?
I just kind of highlighted the like the strangers example, but
But
I
like,
don't think I really knew what it meant.
okay. So, well, you did highlight where it says same principle to similar cases.
Yeah.
So I would just make sure I would put something like that in the map. Because we wrote apply principles consistently means same principle to similar cases. And then we have the example of, the don't lie thing.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the rational enterprise part,
Yeah.
and then paragraph three.
Um, so I put an arrow down from the consistent principles. I said it wasn't the only requirement. Moral principles supposed to be impartial. Uh, so that's all I put. I think
Okay,
it's because I didn't really understand what this sentence meant.
yeah. So it's okay. So I would just kind of like shorten it to just say like arrow above also need impartial. And then the other
Yeah.
part, don't lie to your friends, is not inconsistent if you lie to strangers, but I guess it's okay if you didn't get that part. And then what about paragraph four?
But new idea said moral person is a person of principle. Uh, and then moral judgment relates to consistency. And then I put why to and then I put to differentiate right from wrong.
Okay. So yeah, you could have just put the moral principles equals difference between right and wrong, which are dependent
Yeah.
on principles, but that's still good. Okay. Paragraph five.
Uh, Good moral judge has to know relevant principles and apply consistency and judgment to similar cases.
Okay, that's good.
Paragraph six, I put moral principles are able to detect right from wrong.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't put the non-moral features part.
Okay. And then what was your main idea?
Main idea was moral principles and moral judgments are similar in that they both have similar consistent principles and are able to differentiate between right and wrong.
Got it. Yeah, so I think that for the most part, your map is good. You can look at what we wrote here and compare it to see if,
I
like,
think I'm just putting in too much information. I can just kind of shorten it a little bit.
yep, yep, yep. But all in all, I think that it just that originally you may have missed the stuff about consistency being applying the same principle to similar cases, but you did include it in the main idea. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think your map was pretty good, but this is just definitely one of the hardest passages I've seen. Like,
Hmm.
and some like a lot of times, like if the passage is hard, the questions get easy, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Here, passage was hard and the questions were hard as well. And you saw that with, you know, the distribution of people who chose which
Yeah.
choices. So yeah, I think that you're still improving in cars and that this was just a really difficult passage.
Good. Do you have time to go over your old question?
Um, I have a meeting at 3:30, but like
Okay.
if it's a short one, like I could
Yeah, um it's just based on
uh,
the Haworth projection. Or I don't know how to go from like this to this, kind of.
um galactose derivative shown in figure 3. Figure 3 let's see. So okay. Let's see. Hmm. Uh, yeah, let me see what they say for the red oriented towards the viewer, up above the plane. Groups in blue oriented away from the viewer, down below the plane. Hmm. All right, I'm gonna have to like look into this. So do you think it's all right if I
Yeah,
next time?
we can do it another time.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
We can do
So
another one later on. So
awesome.
yeah.
So okay. So you're doing well on your test
I
and
improved, yeah, by like a point or two. They're just really hard. I don't know.
mhm.
Like yeah.
Yep. And so let's see. Do you want me to put you in or for the next time or are you gonna use the calc?
I'll schedule it because then I have work and then I take another practice exam on Friday. So I think maybe Monday would be good.
Okay. So this should just be 83 for today.
Okay.
And you can send that.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'll see you.